It's not divination. Like, you don't predict the future with astrology, but there are themes and energies that we as astrologers see, and we can see because of the movement of the planets, we can see like what's ahead of us. So right now, and this is April 26th, it's definitely one of the most intense times of this year.
This is Realigned and Unfiltered.
Together, we're peeling back the layers, exploring consciousness, and transforming life's messiness into meaning.
Welcome back to Realigned and Unfiltered. Today's episode is another step forward in our conversation about sovereignty, our personal journeys, and awakening to things that may have intentionally been hidden from us.
I can think of a few things that would fit into this category.
Yes.
But today's topic is one that I have found so much truth and help from, especially as a psychologist working with people who are so very individually made. Today, we're going to be talking about astrology.
And not only are Carly and I having this conversation together, we are bringing in an expert to go deeper into this conversation with. So take what resonates with this conversation, with you, and leave what doesn't. Okay. But I will point out that there is a tension here, right? Especially for those that have been raised in religion, like Carly and myself. How many of us that were taught astrology is evil or forbidden or dangerous, right, to get into?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important tension to name, and definitely something that this podcast is doing is we're talking about what we were told to stay away from or not look at, or kind of what was taken away from us. If we look back into the historical context of all of the things that people utilized, how much of that was taken away, and how returning to these things can be helpful. So there is historical context, and we will jump into that. As you know, that's my favorite thing to do before we bring in our experts. But why don't we talk a little bit also about the Bible, because that's the religious context we come from.
Right. And that's the tension that I, keep coming back to, really, because in the Bible, it does say that God placed the lights in the sky for signs and seasons. And the Magi, right? The three wise men who followed the star to find Jesus. I mean, when you think about that, those are essentially, if you want to think about it, astrologers. What do we do with that? What do we do with that information?
No, exactly that. There's even interpretations of the Bible now that actually use the word astrologers, the three astrologers, rather than magi.
Yeah.
But I think the question isn't whether the stars carry meaning. I think the question is what posture we take towards them.
Right.
So are we worshiping the stars? And by worshiping, I truly mean, are we giving our power away?
Okay.
Or are we reading a language that God placed within creation?
Yes. And I think that's the key distinction to make, right? Between idolizing something versus using it as a tool. And it's actually the same conversation we have about anything here on this podcast.
It is.
Like therapy, NLP, meditation, visualization, even prayer. It could either become a crutch if we stop trusting in, what we're doing and just start begging and become so reliant on this outside source.
Yeah, it's a sovereignty conversation. Every conversation that we have is a sovereignty conversation. So what I know for sure is that our faith, I mean, my faith, your faith, the faith of this realigned and unfiltered collective energy here, it's not about staying in the box. It's not about staying within the institution or the box the institution built for us. It's about authentic relationship with truth. And where we find that truth is, I think, many places. So we're not telling anyone what to believe today. We're just bringing some exposure to a thing that I think was put into a caricature that we need to dissolve at this point.
Right. And to your point, again, as we get into this conversation deeper with Hannah, which we're going to introduce in just a few minutes, to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And when we think about it, for most of human history, this whole astrology, it wasn't this whole woo-woo terminology. We use woo-woo for astrology now, right? It wasn't something that was referred to that way. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't dismissed. It was something that was studied and respected and integrated into daily life.
Mm-hmm,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. The sun, the moon, the farming seasons. I mean,
Yeah,
all based on the sky.
exactly. I mean, we look back into our ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia and Egypt and Greece. They used astrology to track the time, understand the
Mm-hmm.
seasons,
Mm-hmm.
uh, guiding the agriculture and interpreting, what the movement of the skies and the stars meant with nature, with Earth. So,
Right. Right. Exactly. And then, you know, much later within the human story, institutionalized religion becomes a thing. And where astrology suggests that patterns exist outside of human control, individuals can interpret meaning for themselves and apply that to their life story. There's a relationship between the cosmos and the self. Well, that level of empowerment, that level of personal ability is not controllable.
right.
And institutionalized religion, and institution in general, wants to be able to control. And so then this structure and authority develops, and it puts the strong emphasis on centralized interpretation, right? Doctrine, approved channels of truth. So you can see how astrology and this kind of authority structure were really at odds with one another.
Yeah,
So
right.
practices that encouraged personal interpretation, like astrology, were gradually just pushed to the margins. And actually, there's definitely historical stories where astrologers or people who looked at the sky and who looked at the stars and the moon and the sun to even speak truth about how the world works and exists within the cosmos were brutally taken care of.
Yeah.
So we come to the medieval period. So here's us jumping into history here. We come to the medieval period where suppression and separation is like a big thing, right? But by the time you reach the Middle Ages, astrology is still being practiced by scholars and physicians, but it becomes increasingly restricted, and it's often viewed with suspicion and used outside of the accepted frameworks. Okay, so this is where we begin to start seeing there's approved knowledge and then there's forbidden mystical knowledge. So we have a real separation happening here. Later in the Enlightenment shift, this is the scientific revolution, right? Astrology is further dismissed, not just by religion now, but by science. So astrology ends up in this unique position of being rejected by religion, dismissed by science, even though, in my opinion, it itself is a science. When I see something like dismissed by science, it really reminds me of a time fairly recently where we were told, and honestly often, trust the science, trust the science. And that term even just gives me the heebie-jeebies at this point. And look, we've been using a certain version of a certain type of science to sever people from their own connection to truth for a
Right.
very, very long time.
And Carly, I think this becomes very relevant to what we talk about here in the awakening process, right? Because awakening often involves questioning that. Like, as you were talking, my hands are going up like, well, why? Well, why? Why?
Yeah.
Why? Who or what has been given the authority over our understanding of ourselves and our relationship with the earth and, the where we're at today.
Mhm.
So that when systems have been teaching us that meaning must come from outside of us, that truth needs to be interpreted for us,
Mhm.
we start feeling like our inner knowing isn't reliable, right? We
Mhm.
disconnect from ourselves to a
Mhm.
certain aspect.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and so then with astrology, when we're approaching it from a really grounded and thoughtful way, we learn that we can do something very different with astrology. It doesn't tell you who to be. It gives you this language, this understanding of what you're already experiencing about yourself, which will become more understandable as we jump into this conversation with our wonderful guest, Hannah. So I'm so excited to welcome our guest today. This is Hannah. Hannah is originally from Vienna, Austria, but now she is a location independent entrepreneur running her own business online for 13 years now. She's got an educational background in law. She started her work in business and marketing, and she eventually began to use her passion and knowledge as an astrologer to create her own unique brand, working with entrepreneurs, helping them build their business strategies based on their personal natal charts. A quadruple Leo, Hannah brings her fiery passion everywhere she goes. And so we're so excited and so grateful to have her on the show today. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm really excited to have you here today. As someone, I have not really dove in deep into astrology. The most I did growing up was, pick up a magazine, scroll to I knew I'm a Leo, scroll to Leo and read that for a month. And it would be, I was always excited about what the magazine was going to tell me. Uh, but I think, even following up to our last episode about deconstructing, as people are going through these deconstructing, anything in their life, they get to this point of searching for more truth. And I came across astrology a little bit more, or it piqued more of my interest as I started wanting to know more about the truth of things that have, astrology has existed forever, when we kind of look into it and and start diving a little bit more into it. And so I'm just curious for you, Hannah, how did it start with you? How did you get into astrology? Um, and then maybe we could talk about what is astrology or whatever order you want to take it. But just give us an intro for someone like me who really, I don't have much knowledge of it, but I want to learn. And I think it's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. So, how it started for me is I don't really know how to answer that question. I feel like it's somewhat always been there. And then you can even see in people's charts where there is sort of a, connection to astrology. And that's very present in my chart too. So I feel like it's always been there. And it's also interesting because I grew up very differently from you guys. Like my context was very different. I remember my mom had if I translate it from German, it was like the big golden book of astrology. It was like a huge, 500-page book. And I remember being 11, 12 years old and reading about my crush's sign and just feeling seen and just being curious and just kind of connecting with astrology as a language. Like for me, it's a tool and a language that just helps us connect with, you know, each other, ourselves, our environment, the whole cosmos and everything that's going on. So for me, it was just a language that I seemed to understand from a young age on. And I just always use it in my personal life. And I just got more and more into it. And at some point, I was doing it so much with other people that I just mentioned it or I explained people, you have, a Leo moon and that means this and that, and you should be exploring this and that. And then people wanted to pay me for it at some point. So I started kind of organically, including it in my business. And that's a very short version of how I ended up doing this professionally.
Wow. I can resonate with the way that you're talking about it being a language. It's just something
Yeah.
that you always understood. It's something that you always spoke. And as somebody who knows Hannah, she's got a really incredible grasp on languages. So I love the way that you use it as it's a language that I spoke. It's a way that I related with people. It's a way that I related with myself. I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. It's not divination. It's an actual language and an art and almost like a mathematical science from the way that it looks when you look at it.
It definitely is an art and a science, and to come back to kinda the second part of your question, what is it even? For me, it is a tool that helps us mostly understand ourselves better, but also, like I said, current energies and cycles. It's not divination, you don't predict the future with astrology, but it's also like, there are themes and energies that we as astrologers see, and we can see because of the movement of the planets, we can see, what's ahead of us. And there's big cycles that repeat itself throughout history in a way, that are very similar. So you never know exactly how it's going to play out, but really big themes you can see. And it's not surprising then, the things that happen in the world or the big, topics that we've been dealing with over the last years and what we're going into right now. So there's so much to it, but basically for people who maybe don't know as much about astrology, I think there's two, I will say, main ways that you can use it, and there's a gazillion different, ways to use astrology, to do astrology. Like there's 100 different schools, but I think the most sort of practical ones are using your own birth chart, which is your natal chart. And I can explain what that even is in a second to understand yourself. Like this is a static chart that doesn't change anymore. And then to use transits of, your, well, in relation to your own chart or just like the collective to see what is even going on, like what is happening to kind of like try and make sense of the world a little bit more, and just to be able to navigate, right? Because it's a lot going on.
So when you say transits, you're kind of talking about, there's our natal chart, which is like the snapshot. I understand it as like the snapshot in the sky the
Exactly.
moment that you come through the birth canal, right? Like
Exactly.
we'll give you our birth date, birth time, birthplace, and we see what the sky said when we were born. That's our natal chart, and that's what you said was static or fixed. And then
Exactly.
the transits are more like what's going on in the sky right now and how that affects us. Is that correct?
Right. So your birth chart, like you said, that will be the snapshot of, our solar system and the relevant planets that we choose to work with. Um, at the time that you were born, looking sort of like up at the sky or also down, like not looking at the sky from the place that you were born. So for me, it would be, August 16th, Vienna, Austria. Oh, the sun was up pretty high and the moon has already set. And so this is kind of like what you would look at when you look at a birth chart and you see all these planets. But since it's like a snapshot, it is kind of like frozen in time. So it's static in the sense that these planets are not moving. Like your birth chart doesn't change. Like my sun is in Leo and it will stay that way until I leave this incarnation. But then the planets keep moving, right? The universe is not static. The solar system is not static. So right now, as we're recording this, the sun is not in Leo, it's in Aries. And so the planets change signs, they change positions, they move all the time. And those are the so-called transits. Right now, the sun is transiting through Aries, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So it makes so it, I, the way I when you hear you describe it, it's kind of like, okay, let's pay attention to the energy that you were born into, right? Like that's your kind of the energy you were born into, and then understanding that with the energies that are constantly changing too could be valuable. I think about like you talking about the planets and how, this is in transit, not those planets come with certain energies, right? That can influence us. Is that correct? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes,
Perfect.
exactly. So basically, the planets, you can think of them as like players or personalities, right? Astrology uses mythology as well. So we have Venus, and Venus is the archetype of Venus. We know that from mythology. It's the
Yeah.
goddess of love, it's femininity, and this is what the planet Venus represents, It's relationship, it's my values, it's pleasure, it's also my sense of self-worth. It's also connected to money and like the finer things in life and like my magnetism and my radiance and all of that. So that is just one example of one planet, right? Or like the sun is your whole identity and literally your light that you came here to shine on planet Earth and, share with the world. And so the planets are kind of like different personalities and players, and we all have all of them in our charts. And then the signs that the planets show up in, right? Like we could say your sun is in Leo, like mine, or Carly's is in Aquarius. So the sun is still the sun with, it's still the same sort of persona, but it shows up with different qualities. Like our Leo sun will be maybe a little bit more outgoing and fun and creative and dramatic, than the Aquarius sun that's a little bit more rational and kind of like focused on, being friends with everyone and very social and not so self-centered. No, I'm just kidding, but these are just so these are the different kind of qualities that the planets choose to express. Right? So it's like it has layers. right?
Yeah.
I like the way that you put that, and I love that you brought the mythology into it. Like, I love that we can understand the planet Venus as the goddess, that we understand from mythology, because that actually does bring a lot of nuance to the conceptualization of, like, okay, so if Venus is in my fourth house, what does that mean?
You brought in another layer, which are the houses, because so far I mentioned the planets that are kind of like the who, right? The players. Like we all have
Okay.
these different sort of aspects within ourselves that show up when it comes to different sort of life areas or just different topics. Like I just mentioned, Venus, you could say, is like love and money, and the moon is it's like your inner world, your emotions, your needs. It's a very intimate planet. Again, this is super condensed right now. And then I mentioned the signs. So every planet is in a sign because literally, you can see it in the sky that if the sun right now is transiting through Aries, that means that the sun is in the position of the constellation of Aries in the sky. Like you can look up and see it. The sun and the moon are visible. So these are the easiest examples. Sometimes you can see Venus too, but that's what it actually means, that the sun right now, it's April. So it's transiting through the sign of Aries up in the sky. It's not random woo woo, whatever. Someone made this up. Like you can literally look up to the sky and see it. Some planets you can't see with, the human eye. You need something, but that's basically what it means. And so the sun is in Aries right now. So we have the planet, the player, the sign, which is really the quality that the player expresses at this time. And then you, Carly, mentioned the houses, which is kind of like the sort of where. Okay, so we have who, what, and where. And so the houses represent, I would say, life areas where things will play out. So, for example, Carly, I know your chart and your sun, the player, is in Aquarius. That's the sign, that's the quality that your sun wants to express, but it's in your seventh house, and that's the house of relationship. So you're someone who loves to collaborate, right? Who values relationships and connections. Like we're literally right here recording a podcast that you guys are collaborating on. So that's very much in alignment with, your sun in Aquarius, and you have a big relationship focus in your chart. So it just means that in this life area, I'm using the seventh house of relationship as an example, there's a lot of energy that you bring to the table naturally. It's
Mhm.
potential that you can use. It's not like my chart says I must get married. Like, no, but it's like
Yeah.
it well, you have been married for a long time, so that also kind of works for you. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So these
Right.
are the houses, so that's like a third layer that makes the whole thing a little bit more complex, but also more specific.
Right. Yeah. I could appreciate those details for sure. And I think you're bringing into awareness how the value and the guidance that astrology can offer, right? In these details, in these specific areas in your life. Like, um, yeah, maybe we could dive into that. So, like, when you work, Hannah, with somebody, that's what you're kind of looking at. Okay, really, like, what is all this energy based on all these different details and these different things, and this is where kind of it could help you in your life, right? Like, and push you forward if you want to, if you choose to use it.
Yes, I think it's a very helpful tool that you can use, but it's never, you know, something that you have to give your power away to. And it's like, oh, but my chart says this, and now I must, or I can't do this because my moon is not in Leo and I'm just not that creative. Like, no, we never use it as like an excuse or whatever. Like, we use it responsibly to show us potential and
Yeah.
also potential challenges that just help us, gain a deeper sense of understanding for ourselves. Like, I, for example, have quite a challenging moon position in my chart. And again, this doesn't make me a victim or give me like, you know, here are all my excuses because, oh, boo-hoo, my moon is in the eighth house and it's so hard. Like, no, but it helped me understand, like, why is my internal emotional world so intense and so turbulent? And why do I feel things so deeply? And why do I pick up on other people's emotions? And maybe why do people come to me with their heavier topics? And it just makes
Mhm.
sense knowing that, and it really helped me understand myself and better and also be more compassionate, towards myself, and then learn to use this potentially challenging moon placement. I'm just sticking with that example as something beneficial, because it helped me understand that this is also kind of like a therapist's placement, right? Oh, I've
Mm,
been through so much emotionally and I can hold so much heaviness and I can work with people's shadows. So that gives me a resilience and a capacity, right? Where before that, I always felt like, "Ugh, it kind of sucks," you know?
yeah.
So it really helped me. That was just one example. And I work with people mostly in a business context, but you can see so much in the chart. But working with people in the business context is really, really fascinating because you can see so much and it helps people make better decisions, right? Because there's so much noise outside and everyone has an opinion on literally everything and who you should be and what you should do and whatever. So I think using your birth chart as your kind of like compass helps you to make decisions that are in alignment with yourself and your needs and your gifts and your potential, rather than, for example, forcing yourself to show up on Instagram all the time if that really isn't for you and you should be doing a podcast instead. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's so much there.
Really appreciate that, because one conversation that Diana and I were having was, is it something that you could use as an excuse, or is it something you could use as a
Yeah.
coach, right? Like, oh well, my, exactly that, like my moon is here and so therefore I can't, or therefore, woe is me. Sure, you can choose victimhood, you always can.
Yeah.
You can also choose growth and resilience, and it's just like you said, it's another tool for understanding your soul's journey and the soul mission and the soul purpose, and it's another way to find the best way forward if that's what you might want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is really cool to understand the layers, basically the layers and how it can be understood and how it can be used. And it's very complex. Like, it's a very complex language. It is a very complex art. I mean, you have to literally know so many things to understand it. Like, how long did it take you to really get a grasp on this? And what have you done to really educate yourself at the level you're at?
It's a good question, and I guess depending on who I'm sitting next to, I feel like, either I'm a super expert or I'm a baby. And like I think when you commit to this like path of astrology, you also commit to being like a lifelong student, because there's so much to explore and to learn, and it's kind of humbling as well. But for me, like I said, I've always kind of like felt this connection, so I've always, you know, enjoyed reading books about it and just keeping in the loop with current astrology and all of that. And it's been maybe, I don't even know how many years, maybe 6, 7, 8 years that I started diving deeper into it, and also taking courses and learning from different people and different sort of modalities, because like I said, there's so much. Like, you can go full on into, you know, I don't know, the kind of like divination, what you call it, part of astrology, which isn't that, but it's kind of like, prognostics, or you could dive deep into evolutionary astrology, which really explores the soul's path and past lives and where you come from, and, what you're here to heal or transform or experience in this incarnation. Like, there's so many layers. It's so fascinating. So I'm just a huge nerd and I keep learning and diving deeper, but it takes a while, and honestly, like, that's why I'm like, now it's in the process of becoming a little bit pop culture-y, and I will predict something that's not a huge prediction, but it's like that will get more and more and more with Uranus moving into Gemini. I'm pretty sure of it, just because, the information is just going to explode so much more. But yeah, now you got these like chat GPT astrologers and whatever
Yeah.
showing up on Instagram and telling you all these. It's a little bit, I think it's very important with, astrology, but most things in life, to use your knowledge responsibly.
Mm,
And you have a responsibility as an astrologer, because you're telling people very deep, meaningful things about themselves and their life path. And I think that should be taken seriously. Like, I did not charge for readings or show up as a professional astrologer probably years after I could have already been doing it, just because I wanted to take it seriously and show up responsibly. And yeah, there's a lot of noise out there, so let's see how this goes, but it does take a while to really be proficient. It's like learning a
Right.
language. You can be faster or not, but I do think that it's important to keep repeating myself, right? Use it responsibly, choose your astrologers wisely too, because it can really impact, like you can't unhear something once someone said it to you, and then it just
Yeah.
has an impact. So yeah, I think it's important to just be aware of that too, right?
I love that you said that. And I think that's just yeah, a lot of wisdom coming through with your experience and the growth that you've done, right? Like how you said you wanted to become more proficient with it. Because everyone, I think, is at this time point in time going to chat GPT or AI for everything. I mean, I know that I've done it. And Kylie was like, no, don't go to don't go to an astrologer or go to astrology.com. I'm like, okay. She's like, it will mess things up and and it does because
It does.
AI, it hallucinates. It will give you what you wanna hear.
Uh-huh.
It tells you what you wanna hear, um, so I love that you said that because I think people need to keep the humanness to all of this, and, you know, again, going back to this as being an ancient practice, things that people have always looked to the stars. There wasn't AI back then. People literally looked to the stars. People felt the connections and felt the energies, and, I think that's what you're highlighting here, which is great to hear.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that it's such a science and that it's been such a science for so long, for so, so long. Like, do you have any concept of how long astrology has been used?
I mean, I don't know when it's not been used because, like you said, the history of astrology is a little bit of a mystery too, because no one can really say like, oh, and then this guy made the connection with mythology. Like, no, it's quite interesting, but well, that's a whole different conversation. But people have always used the stars to navigate. I think if I'm not mistaken, I read this somewhere recently that it even said it in the Bible, like that the stars are there to navigate. And you can interpret that literally as in like, oh, this is, north and this is where we're going with our little ship. And also like most, I don't know, religious or philosophical texts are not literal. So it means you use the stars to navigate life yourself, just the cycles, of what's happening, even, the seasons and everything. You can tell by where the sun is, which season you're in, or where the constellations of whichever sign you're looking at show up on the horizon, all these things. So yeah, it's just really an amazing tool to navigate, and I think it's been around for a very long time.
I think it's probably been around as long as the sky has been around. I mean,
That's what I'm saying, like, when has it not been there? That's hard to say.
Hmm. So that's interesting. You mentioned the Bible. I mean, we even know that the three wise men who went to go see Jesus when he was born. I mean, they followed the star there, right? They some translations of the Bible actually now translate it as the astrologers who went to go and see Jesus and bring him gifts. So, I mean,
Interesting.
certainly astrology is woven in there into the old wisdom texts. I mean, many of them definitely. And, part of Diana's and my discussion has been when the religious groups decided to start disempowering people in order to have a singular power, one of the ways we disempower is to take away people's awareness and take away people's knowledge. So if we take away people's specific knowledge about themselves or specific knowledge about the sky, let's say, they suddenly are not as empowered. I mean, I certainly have felt way more empowered in my life having come to understand my astrology, and it not as an excuse or a crutch or anything, just like, okay, it actually makes a lot of sense for me that I focus a lot of attention here, and it makes a lot of sense for me that I use things that are available in certain contexts, and because you can see how that will help with the progress of my life and my design. And that's a pretty scary thing when people want to control. When you wanna control someone,
Oh, yeah.
why would you want them to have that much knowledge and that wisdom and that much awareness? So, Why do you think it's important for people to have the awareness of their natal chart at the very least?
Well, I think it's like you came with sort of a manual, really, in a way, that shows you themes that are important to look at, as well as potentials that you bring to the table, as well as potential challenges that you might face throughout this lifetime. And something you said before, which is something that I always say, like, I believe that, whatever the challenge is that you see in your chart, there's also always the medicine in the chart. Like, it's never like, oh, I'm sorry, yours just sucks and that's just what you're working with. Like, no, it's like even if there's something that's really challenging and your soul shows to go through certain hardship or certain, periods of darkness and heaviness, there's a reason for that. And it's not random, it's connected to certain learning experiences, lessons, whatever that you just needed to experience in this life. And then there's always kind of like a point where you can connect these dots and it makes sense. And then it's like, oh, I became a healer in this, or I am now helping people with this. And so you can very much see a lot of that in the chart. So I think it's extremely important, and it can actually be very healing for people who have had very traumatizing experiences in their lives, or very hard, cards dealt, to see that it's not random. Like, it's not like whatever, the universe, God just hates me, or I just got unlucky. It's like, no, there's reasons for that, and it's not shaming people like you did something bad and now you're being punished. No, that's also not it. But just being able to understand that. And then also, like I said, helping people navigate. I think I mentioned this in our little chat that we had before we pressed record, that I was like, for example, I'm the kind of person, I studied law. I have a master's degree in law, but then didn't pursue it, and I started my business instead. And then I was really deep in like copywriting, marketing, and then I was like bored. Now I'm adding astrology to it, and so it's like I'm the kind of person, for example, I keep like reinventing myself in a way, and it's just super obvious in my chart. It's like I'm supposed to do that. And I kept judging myself or like questioning my choices. Like, am I doing this wrong? Am I just finished my master's degree in law? Like, I should be a lawyer now, or actually, no, because there's cycles in my life where I will get this sort of like surge of energy that's like change, transformation, reinventing myself. And then that's exactly what I'm meant to be doing. And again, this is just another example of like how helpful it is to understand yourself. So I
Yeah.
think it's super, super important. If I had to just choose one, like natal chart or sort of transit astrology, I would choose the natal chart every time, because it helps you understand yourself, connect with yourself, feel more compassion for yourself, like I said, and also others. So you have a family, you have relationships, you have employees, you have friends, moms, whatever. Like, it will help you just do the same for others. So I think it's just really important for everyone to understand their own kind of like, essence and how they're wired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that again, I really want to highlight the aspect that you're bringing into that. It brings awareness to kind of like the patterns that you've carried. Like, let's say for someone like me, I've, I've never really, used astrology to guide me, but then there's been moments in my life where I'm like, darn it, why isn't this working? Or, like I want to do this, like mentally, I really want to do this, but emotionally, like I don't really feel like there's this misalignment, right? And so you're saying you could go on with life like that and try to kind of figure it out yourself, which eventually I think people that are introspective or try to do self work figure themselves out and figure out their patterns. And you could do it the long way, the long form way, or you could use astrology to kind of like, hey, here's your insight. This is what what the energy has been saying about you and how you were born into it and how you could use it. And then knowing that and having the awareness of like, okay, now you could use tools like I use neurolinguistic programming, or Carly has therapy and her tools, other tools that could help you even further, right? Like with the insight that you now have from astrology that brings that awareness. Like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is why I feel, this certain way. And it brings back the power to the person where it shouldn't disempower you. I really like that you said that too. Like you should really like don't make it an excuse. I really like highlighting that too. Use this to inform you to make better decisions and guide you in the way that you do want your life to be. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Not an excuse and also not a judgment. Like when you understand there certain things about yourself, for example, I'm such an easy example because I have like 10, well, we out of the 10 planets that we all have, the main ones, I have like 8 in fire, so there's elements, right? So I'm like all fiery energy, and that means, for example, I'm really good at starting things and being like super enthusiastic and like getting everyone on board and like woo woo woo. Am I the best at like finishing everything and fleshing out the details? No. And I probably never will be, and that's okay. And that was, for example, like a big learning because I always judged myself for it. And I'm like, that's just not my strength. So, for example, in business, I could hire someone who complements my strengths, and I can just start everything and be like wooing out there and talking about stuff and like doing all my Leo things. And then someone else can take over. And, you know, there's people who would hate to be in my position, like having to be out there on video and like doing all these things. And they're so happy that they can just be in the background and, finish the task that I give them. And it's just a win win situation like that, right? Or I can maybe, if I have this knowledge about myself, sure, I can learn some things and be like, okay, I know that I'm more of a starter than a finisher. So maybe this could help me make decisions in the way that I manage my projects or how many projects I even take on at the same time, where it's super
Yeah.
unrealistic that I'm going to be able to finish even
Mm.
one, and like, so it's like, that's what I mean. Like, it looks like it's this big, sort of woo concept, but it's actually very practical for your everyday life decisions if you want it to be,
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
right?
this concept of woo woo, we keep mentioning it woo woo, and I reference myself as like a little more woo woo when I'm talking to a pastor. We say woo woo a lot, and it's really interesting because these are the ancient arts. This is the foundational. This is pre-science. This is pre medical field. This is pre
Yes.
business degrees, right? Like this all happened before, working with the sky and the planets, and maybe more of like our source knowing and our inner knowing that we had before there was so much indoctrination. Even like plant medicine, working with plants. Again, it's considered woo woo to go to an herbalist instead of go to a pharmacy. Why? Like, it's so interesting to me. And I mean, this is another conversation and probably another podcast, but why woo woo? And why do we say that like it's something that we have to explain or clarify?
You're
Like, it's so
right.
interesting, right?
Yeah, that is interesting. We've gone backwards. Like I think society today has highlighted all that stuff for a certain reason, right? It's certain
Mm,
agendas that are going out there to disempower the individual, disempower people. Right.
So, okay, so speaking of
absolutely.
empowerment, you mentioned there's kind of these well, many, many levels, but these two kind of main levels of astrology. So you've done a really great job of explaining to us personal astrology, this natal chart, this static fixed thing where we can really understand ourselves, and we can really help, or we can use it to help us as a tool. And then you mentioned transits, and you mentioned like the sky keeps moving and things keep changing, and you mentioned the sun is in Aries right now. Now, because I love mythology, I know a little bit about Aries, and the sun is in Aries right now, and the world is a little bit in flux at the moment, for lack of a better term. So I wonder if it would be interesting to our audience and kind of fun to just together talk about a little bit about what's going on right now in the sky that may help us understand what's going on in the world. Because I think we'd all like a little clarity on what the heck is going on and maybe what to do to ride this whole thing out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question. I do want to say just one thing to clarify, and then we get into what the hell is happening right now. When I mentioned the kind of like your birth chart and then the transits, they're also not separates because there's transits happening all the time that are just true for the collective, like our example, the sun is in Aries. That's true for all of us. But at the same time, these collective transits are also personal transits, so they affect my chart. So I can say, because Diana's, Aries rising, that right now the sun is transiting through her first house, for example. So it will also always affect your static birth chart. That one doesn't change, but the planets are, if you imagine, sort of like circling around that, and then they make aspects and they touch certain points in your chart. So they activate certain dynamics, topics, themes in your life as well. So that's not separate. I just wanted to explain that so that that's clear.
I like that. That's really helpful. So, like,
Yeah,
what's
it is.
going on is happening to all of us and impacting us individually at the same time based on what's going on in our own chart.
Exactly.
It's so cool. And again, like very multi layered.
Yeah.
It is. So we're all experiencing the same collective, and then it affects us all a little bit differently,
Right.
or a lot differently depending on your chart. Like if you have a lot of planets in Aries right now, like you're going to be feeling it, maybe a little bit more than someone who has no Aries in their chart, or no, cardinal signs or whatever. So, yeah, right now, and this is April 26th, it's definitely one of the most intense times of this year, just because there's so much change. So much is happening. There's so much movement. I don't want to get too technical, but like right now and in these weeks, we have, I don't think, something that we've ever had since we started records of, the planet's movements. And
Really?
it's just, yeah, it's a massive stellium in Aries. And a stellium just means that we have 3, 4, or 5, whatever, more planets in the same sign. So it's like a really intense, focus on one energy. So it's like you got to imagine, like I said, we have 10 main planets, a little bit more if you include Chiron and some other, asteroids, whatever. So out of these, we right now have the Sun, Mars, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and in a few days also the Moon and also Chiron in Aries. So it's a lot. It's a
So it's
very
pretty congested in Aries right now.
massive Aries energy. Yes.
And what is Aries energy, please? Because I have something Aries in my sign, so I want to know, what does Aries what does Aries mean?
That was cute. Yes, you're Aries rising. And you have the North Node. So, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's masculine energy, it's fire energy, it's the starter. Aries in the mythology, right, is Mars energy, so it's the god of war. It's the warrior, okay? It's the one that takes action, the one that is also, in a sense, a pioneer. It's about courage and you know, putting yourself out there and forward movement. Aries is not the one who thinks about it for a week and then sleeps on it and feels into it. No. Aries is like boom, fireball, here I freaking go. So it's quite intense, like forward pushing energy, which is good because we've been in so much Pisces la la land of feeling our feelings and healing our wounds and reflecting and introspecting and meditating and visioning and dreaming and la la la, so that there wasn't a lot of, like, actual physical forward movement. And
Yeah.
maybe a lot of people felt like they had the vision and they wanted to do stuff, but it didn't really work that way, or it was kind of foggy still, and there wasn't the motivation, right? Mars and Aries energy, it lights the fire under your butt and off you go. So it makes you start things and gets you, ideally, out of like overthinking, overanalyzing, or being stuck in a healing loop for the next 20 years. It just gets you out there and moving, which is great. And then again, too much of a good thing can also be a little bit dangerous. So this can be very impulsive, right? It can also be aggressive. It could be confrontational energy. Mars is also about competition. And, like I said, it's the warrior. So this could be the peaceful warrior and the guardian energy of the healed masculine, or it could be the punch you in the face, get out of my way energy.
Mm.
Right? So we got to find a little bit of balance here. but this is so active this entire month. It's like
So this
one
is
after the other.
Aries. This is the month. Like that's all of that you're saying. That's this month. And then what does it mean that the moon is there? What does it mean that, did you say Neptune is there? What does it like? What does it mean that each of those planets is there? Maybe just in brief.
Yeah. So this month has this super intense Aries energy because the faster moving planets, like the moon is the fastest one, and then we have the sun, and then Mercury, and then Mars. So these are the inner planets, right, that move quite fast. They're here now. The moon will be in Aries for like 2.5 days, and then she moves on. But the sun is there for a month, as we know, and the Mercury is there for a few weeks. Mars is there for a little bit longer, but then we have Saturn and Neptune that are outer planets that move way slower. Like it takes, you know, Saturn 29.5 years to complete a cycle. So Saturn stays in a sign for like 2, 3 years. So this energy will stay the same. It takes Neptune, whatever, like 248 years. So Neptune will stay, I think, for like 14 years or something like that. So this is a big cycle. And this is just the beginning of it. Like they just changed at the beginning of this year, finally.
So what is Neptune?
So if you go back to mythology, Neptune is the god of the sea. It's Poseidon,
Mm.
right? So Neptune is the energy of Pisces. It is the cosmic ocean of, one love, and it's a very sort of ethereal energy. Neptune is all about your dreams and your visions. It's like has no boundaries, right? It's this like vastness. It's about healing and completion. These are all like Neptunian themes. I mean, there's so much more to go into, but it's kind of like this very sort of energetic planet that is a higher octave of love and is very sort of spiritual, if you want. And in Aries, it's kind of doesn't feel very much at home.
Hmm. Yeah. So what does it mean when Neptune like that is in Aries that's like this? Like what, how does that feel then? How are we feeling it as a collective?
The positive aspect can be that you can have all these visions, Neptune, and you get inspired and you have these downloads, Neptune, and you feel connected to cosmic love, and meditate or whatever, and then it's an Aries, so you actually bring your vision to this 3D reality. You take action on it. You're not stuck in the healing cycle, like you're doing stuff, you're out there,
Mm.
and you're just moving forward, and that could be very, very helpful. Or it could just be like action with no purpose because I'm lost in the sea of I have no boundaries, and I'm just confused. Like Neptune is the vision, but it's also illusion and confusion. It can be like fogginess. So there can be like action without purpose or direction and just kind of like being a little bit all over the place, and combined with like Aries impulsiveness, it needs some structure and some boundary, which is what Saturn brings in. So that's great, unless you're more in the shadow sort of expression of Saturn, which is very restrictive energy, very strict, very judgy, very critical. And then, Saturn in Aries can be a little bit hostile and volatile energy too. It could be like, oh, I'm a control freak and I'm the boss, and I'm not afraid to, exert my power using physical violence. So
Mm.
you can see
I can see
what I'm
that
getting at.
happening in the world right now. Yeah. So that's the shadow side of
Saturn and Aries, because Saturn is very much about taking responsibility and being mature. It's about rules, and Saturn is like the boss and the CEO, and it's kind of like the grandfather energy. In mythology, Saturn was not nice. He ate his own children, and
Oh, yeah,
he
that's
was the
right.
father of the Titans. Was not necessarily the nicest, kindest fellow, but he's very strict, but he makes you grow and become mature and take responsibility, and like all these things are good. But Saturn likes control, right? He's like, "Oh, you don't do what I say, I'm going to eat you." That's
Oh,
not a nice energy. And that in Aries, which Aries is all about like in your face,
Wow.
whatever.
Yeah.
So we see that there's like this power play of Saturn, and then it's like connected with the impulsive, aggressive, explosive Aries energy. I mean, do I have to spell it out more
No,
so you
no.
can see what's
Right, right.
happening?
Okay, so any astrologer looking ahead at what planets are going to be transiting where would have seen April coming and would have been
Big time.
saying, yeah, April's going to be intense.
Literally everyone said that. And it's not just that Saturn is in Aries. Now Mars is also in Aries. That's his home sign. And then Mars is going to meet Neptune. That's happening right now. This is why we all have crazy dreams and it's just like super weird. And then he's moving on to meet Saturn. And that's going to be, I think, let's see what happens. But that just kind of like quadruple set energy, and Mars Saturn
Wow.
is not very gentle energy. It's like friction and
Can we can
conflict.
we dive into that? So Mars meets Saturn, and that's not gentle energy, that's conflict. And when is that?
That's basically starting to happen, let's say like 10 days from now. So around, I think, April 19th, if I'm not mistaken. And the 17th is the new moon. So this is where the moon also will be in Aries. So it's just like,
Wow.
it is a massive stellium in Aries. Yeah, it's big.
So if somebody is advising the collective, let's say, about the present transit, about staying sane, staying safe, staying aware, whatever it is that we can maybe ground some of this wildness that some of our leaders may be really just heavily leading into at this point. What would you advise the collective? What would you advise the listenership here?
I mean, that's a good question. It's a big question, I think, especially in April and actually throughout, the rest of the year as we have so much energy, so many planets all moving from, earth and water, which are the more feminine, grounded, softer energies, slower energies, all into fire and air, which is all fast and mental and, dynamic. So there's really like nothing to hold on to. So there is nothing to hold on to. Like, don't try to hold on. Don't get attached. Like, just take it day by day, really, because it's quite chaotic and it will become even more faster when Uranus moves into Gemini end of the month and then stays there for 7 years. So it's just more and more and more, right? Um, Stay grounded. Like, you can only kind of like stay in your lane. Aries is also the sign of the self, right? It's all about me and what do I need and what are my goals and, staying focused. Aries wants you to be focused, not do a gazillion different things. Like choose one, two things, focus, take care of yourself, get grounded, go out in nature, like do your practices. Like you really have to sort of consciously use earth and water to balance out all this fire and air. So if you do that literally by going in the water if you're like us and you live in the Caribbean, or you just go out for a walk in the forest, or you use your breathing to ground yourself, or you use root veggies to ground you. Like it doesn't matter. There's so many ways. Just use your own tools and just be mindful that the energies can be a little hostile and that you might feel a little bit more sort of impulsive. So just take a breath before you make life decisions and burn everything to the ground. And just also be very mindful starting the end of the month throughout the next 7 years and whatever, but it's already kind of in the field, how you interact with information and what information you consume and what you kind of like let into your mental space, because there's just going to be so much more noise and it's going to be so much faster, and there's AI, but it's just going to like explode even more. So also in that, like, come back to yourself, Leave your phone at home when you go for a walk. Like, disconnect also from all this noise and all this intensity and all this madness that's just out there, because it is a lot. Like, I'm not a doom and gloom astrologer, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat it. Like, these
Yeah.
energies are intense and we're all feeling it already,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we are. And I think it's really helpful to know. I mean, we didn't talk too much about how the elements are also a layer within this, but it's come up quite a lot. So it is quite helpful to know that we're really in a season of fire and air. So, like, don't try and grab on to anything that's kind of out there and happening right now. Instead, balance it out in your own life, balance it out in your own self with focusing on water and earth and finding grounding and finding the almost the clarity that we get through water. Like, really, I think that's great advice. It's so interesting that that's astrology advice. Right? I think
Yeah.
that's really cool.
I'd like to say that I'd like to add on to that too, Carly, because it all comes down to at the same time of having the awareness that all this is going on. And I think it also confirms intuitively what a lot of people are feeling. Like there's a lot going on and it doesn't seem like it's gonna slow down. It feels like it's gonna get a little bit more intense. Like I've been feeling that way for sure. And people sometimes get disheartened or they get very, just like, gosh, like what can I do? These are again like astrology is also guiding people to like there are things you do. Go ground yourself. That's some people feel like I think that they dismiss that, but understanding the realism that there's energies going on in the world, right? There's things that are going on. Ground yours. Stay sovereign with yourself. I always come back to like, what could you do as an individual? How could we influence it? How could we help it? We're not going to go and grab the leaders and shake them like, stop this. What could we do as an individual? And it is grounding ourselves.
So interesting. How do we contribute to balance in this very fiery moment in time and not actually feed the fire with our rage or feed the fire with our fear? How do we hold on to our sovereignty? This has been a huge theme for us over the last few months. Hold on to our sovereignty and ground ourselves and create a collective balancing structure for really what's happening that obviously has to happen.
Yeah,
It's
in a
not
way.
random.
It's not
Yeah,
random. Yeah.
I guess that's exactly it. And also, maybe one last thing that I can add also, just to be a little bit more compassionate and understanding with others, because we're all going through that. And you know, some people are a little bit further on their journey of maturation and just, self-development or whatever, soul evolution. That's not a judgment towards others, but you might see people acting out big time. And I'm not saying that's okay, like set your own boundaries, but it
Yeah,
gives us also, I don't know, a little bit of a nudge to be more compassionate with others, because it is really intense and it's intense for everyone.
yeah,
And that's a really good note and always welcome here. Anytime that we can layer compassion towards ourselves and towards others, it's a good thing to do.
absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like we could just keep going. We could ask you what's it gonna be like in the summer? What's it gonna be like
Told
in
you.
the fall? What should I do? How does this affect my chart? But ultimately, I think this was a great introduction for people. I think this was hopefully also going to provide some just like real time validation to everybody feeling the what the heck is going on thing. I find a lot of comfort and help in understanding there's a lot of planets in a really intense place right now. And so all this intensity is real. It's not just in my head,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just in my
Right.
head. And then
It
just
is.
knowing what to do and how to focus. And I also really liked how you said, focus on your thing, like pick your thing and really get serious about your thing. And if you kind of go in your lane and do your thing, it's going to help you and you can really harness this energy for yourself as
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely.
Yes, because it's not all bad, it's not all crazy and intense. Like, yes, it is, but it's also a very sort of, it's a big evolutionary step as well. So you get to be part of that and you get to, contribute and do your own thing, and at the same time contribute to the collective and that big evolutionary, whatever it's going to be, process that we're in, because we're in it anyways.
Yeah. Well, you are just exactly on brand with Realigned and Unfiltered. I mean, it's real conversations and is talking about the self and the collective together and how we can bring balance to both. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on and to talk to
Yeah.
us. And your specialty is working with entrepreneurs using their natal charts. If there are entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs here, watching this podcast, I would really encourage you to get in touch with Hannah, especially if you're German speaking, because most of her online stuff is German. But if it's okay with you, Hannah, we'll link your information in the show
Yeah.
notes. And if anybody would like to contact Hannah for a reading for their natal chart or to work as an entrepreneur, which I highly recommend. Hannah's such a wealth of information. Obviously, we've seen just a snippet of that today, and we're so very, very grateful. And honestly, I just am so thankful to have met you and to have worked with you and to have you here in the Realigned and Unfiltered collective now as well.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you for the expansive conversation. Very expansive.
Yeah. And now we're all going to not chat GPT our natal charts.
Go to Hannah. Go to Hannah.
Please. The one takeaway from today, yes, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you again maybe soon. Thank you for spending this time with us today. If this conversation resonated with you, helped you feel seen, or expanded something in you, we would love for you to stay connected. Make sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share this with someone who's also awakening on their journey. And if you feel called, please leave us a comment. It helps this message reach more people who are realigning with their truth, and it helps us feel connected to you. You can always reach out to us or join the conversation at realignedpod@gmail.com. We are building a community of humans waking up inside the dream, and we're so grateful you're part of it. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake, and stay realigned.